Let's start right here. Better get smart soon. Now, that is not just some off the cuff remark. That's a direct, incredibly high stakes ultimatum from the US president to Iran, dropped right in the middle of a massive diplomatic standoff. We are essentially looking at a suspended reality right now, where just one wrong move on the geopolitical chessboard could ignite an absolute powder keg. And we're talking about millions of lives hanging in the balance here.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a journey to understand the true, multi-layered scale of this conflict. We're going to start way up high, looking at the global geopolitical picture. The macro diplomacy of naval blockades, stalled talks, and these huge economic shockwaves. But we're definitely not stopping there. We're going to trace these massive global currents all the way down to the ground level, looking at the micro-tragedies, the real human realities unfolding while the world's attention is, frankly, looking the other way.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our roadmap for this explainer covers stalled talks and ultimatums, the regional battlefield, global economic shockwaves, the humanitarian toll, and finally, the Pakistani perspective. Let's get right into it. Section 1. Stalled talks and ultimatums. We are currently stuck in this really tense state of no war, no peace. So how did we get to this boiling point so fast? Well, on April 13th, some really crucial talks collapsed over in Pakistan without any kind of deal. Almost immediately after that, the U.S. imposed a naval blockade, literally capturing or turning back Iranian-linked ships in the Gulf and even the Asia-Pacific region. Iran, as you might guess, denounced this as piracy, and they retaliated by declaring the super vital Strait of Hormuz closed to all ships, seizing foreign commercial vessels. And that brings us to right now. President Trump is claiming Iran has actually asked the U.S. to lift the port blockade, but at the same time, he's demanding they get smart soon and saying he's only going to enter agreements that put U.S. national security first. Now, this total standstill is creating some serious friction, even among close Western allies. For instance, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has openly questioned what exact strategic exit the U.S. is actually planning here. He specifically pointed out the direct, painful hit Europe is taking to its energy supply and its economy because of that Strait of Hormuz closure. In response, President Trump publicly fired back, criticizing Merz's stance, basically saying he didn't know what the chancellor was even talking about, right before issuing that ultimatum to Tehran. So, yeah, it is a very stark display of fractured international consensus right now. Section 2. The regional battlefield. Escalation in Lebanon. While world leaders are arguing over strategic exits, the actual physical fallout on the ground is intensifying. Despite talk of a ceasefire, local reporting shows a completely different reality. We are seeing a continuation of a really grim pattern. The Israeli military is actively expanding its air attacks and drone raids across southern Lebanon. And we're talking about strikes on towns and villages that are entirely outside the occupied zone. Reports are also detailing the demolition of entire villages with explosives, basically leaving behind a scorched earth zone. That's going to make it incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, for displaced families to ever return home. And the human cost of these expanding attacks is immediate, and it is tragic. Just recently, at least 7 people, including emergency workers and medics, were killed in southern Lebanon. In one nighttime raid on Jebshit, 5 people lost their lives, including a soldier, and 21 others were injured. That includes 4 children and 9 women. In another really heartbreaking attack on Kirbet Salm, 2 brothers, one of whom was a Lebanese soldier, were killed while they were simply traveling by motorcycle from work back to their home. All right, Section 3, Global Economic Shockwaves, Beyond the Borders. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this staggering number, 1.8 million. That is exactly how many Iranian rials it currently takes to buy a single US dollar on the black market. Just to give you some context, when this war began at the end of February, the rate was about 1.7 million. So this record low, it represents a massive real-time evaporation of wealth. It's the everyday Iranian citizen who's trapped in the standoff, watching their purchasing power just vanish. But the ripple effects don't stop at Iran's borders. They are stretching directly into global supply chains, hitting everything from the prices you see at the grocery store to your summer travel plans. Look at UK aviation. Britain is actively asking refineries to maximize their jet fuel supply right now, just to brace for expected shortages. Heathrow Airport is already warning that passenger numbers are going to take a hit. Zooming out even further, the OPEC fund just had to launch an emergency $1.5 billion package to help developing nations manage the soaring costs of food, energy, and fertilizers. Meanwhile, back in Iran, ordinary citizens are playing this terrifying cat-and-mouse game. They are scrambling to move their share of a $7.78 billion crypto ecosystem out of state-linked platforms into personal private wallets, purely out of fear of state seizure or cyber attacks. Everything is connected. Section 4. The humanitarian toll. Hunger, sewage, and rights. Moving away from markets, we have to look at the brutal reality of sheer survival, and this brilliantly, tragically illustrates the scale of the crisis. According to a UN-backed report, a staggering 1.24 million people in Lebanon are expected to face acute food insecurity at crisis levels or worse between April and August 2026. That is roughly 1 in 4 people. 25% of the analyzed population is facing acute hunger. This is a massive, massive deterioration from before the war, and it's being driven entirely by conflict, displacement, and just crushing economic pressure. This systemic collapse is extending deep into Gaza as well, where residents are terrified that a ceasefire brings absolutely zero actual relief on the ground. To put things in perspective, a paramedic was recently killed by a drone just on his way to work. 4 police officers were killed at their station. Vital services are under attack, borders are restricted, and basic infrastructure is just failing. The local municipality actually had to officially announce they can no longer even pump sewage. Why? Because the pumping stations have completely run out of fuel. We're talking about a complete collapse of everyday livability here. Internally, the crisis in Iran is just as severe. 21. According to the UN Rights Office, that is the number of people who have been executed in Iran since the start of this war. And alongside these executions, which the UN notes include people accused of espionage, being in opposition groups, or being involved in protests, over 4,000 individuals have been arrested. The UN rights chief has been very explicit here, stating that the fundamental rights of the Iranian people are being stripped away in incredibly harsh and brutal ways. Finally, Section 5, the Pakistani perspective, a study in contrasts. Pakistan is in such a highly unique position right now. They're acting as this mediating nation, caught right in the middle between crucial international diplomacy and some truly heartbreaking domestic realities. The contrast is incredibly sharp. On the global stage, you have high-level diplomacy. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is out there actively pursuing Middle East peace efforts, trying to extend ceasefires, and hosting the Iranian foreign minister in Islamabad for critical talks. They're acting as a major geopolitical broker. But at the exact same time, a deeply somber ground-level reality is unfolding back home. Local police in Lahore are investigating a horrific, devastating domestic tragedy that honestly barely registers on the global radar. While the whole world is glued to the Strait of Hormuz, this is what's happening quietly in the Itra area of Lahore. The bodies of 3 young children, aged between just 5 and 9 years old, were recovered from a residence. Police are reporting that these innocent kids were killed with a sharp-edged weapon. Authorities noted the parents were absent at the time, and the children's uncle has been taken into custody on suspicion of involvement. It is a profound, deeply localized nightmare that is standing right there in the shadow of all this global geopolitics. So all of this leaves us with a necessary and pretty heavy question to consider today. As world leaders are out there issuing ultimatums over global straits, launching drone strikes, and navigating these billion-dollar economic blockades, who is actually left to answer for the quiet, devastating tragedies happening right down the street? When our attention is completely consumed by the macro diplomacy of nations, how do we make sure we don't lose sight of the micro tragedies of humanity? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.